Hello and welcome to Pro Wrestling 101. I am your co-host JP John Poz from the two-man power trip of wrestling, and I am joined by the star of the show, the former ECW World Tag Team Champion, the former ECW World Heavyweight Champion, the man who not invented but popularized the spinning tombstone pile driver,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
PJ. Just incredible. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing over there?
Doing very good. It's actually starting to snow a bit. I'm sure you've
It is
got.
starting to snow.
Yep.
Yeah, we haven't gotten it yet, but I'm assuming it's coming up from the south, so we're probably only an hour behind about getting some
Okay.
precipitation over here in this area.
Yes, yes, it's coming. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah, it's
definitely
going to be a
coming.
lot too. So
Yeah, it
hunker down
sucks.
for a few days. Yeah.
Yep. So on today's episode of Pro Wrestling 101, want to get into the nitty gritty of Pro Wrestling 101, which is, of course, the backstage stuff of the training and what you need to do to prepare yourself, the storytelling, psychology, so many different facets of it. But today I wanted to talk about wrestling schools and the
Yeah.
importance of picking the right wrestling school. So kind of just tell your story. I know we told it briefly before, but your story,
Sure.
picking the right wrestling school and picking the Hearts.
Sure. I started looking for wrestling schools. I graduated high school in 1991. I was working at a grocery store. And back in those days, it seems like forever ago, and it kind of is, there was no internet, if a lot of young men and women could even imagine. Information wasn't readily available the way it is today. And wrestling was still a bit more kayfabed. So I was simply a huge fan, wanted to be a pro wrestler, but really had no idea. Like I would call sometimes to the WCW head office or WWF head office just to try to get some information. But, you're just a mark calling and they
Yeah,
blow you
yeah.
off. So it was really hard to get any quality information. So I just by luck, really, I was reading like one of those pro wrestling illustrated magazines from back in the day because really that's how a lot of us got our other wrestling, because we got the WWF over here in the Northeast where
Yep.
I'm from. So if you wanted to get wrestling from all parts of the world, you'd go to Pro Wrestling Illustrated to kind of see what else was going on in the business. And they happened to have in the back page, the very last page, an advertisement for the Hart Brothers Pro Wrestling Camp, and it had all this information, and there's just these great, like "Dare to Be Great" slogans, and I was like, "Wow, holy cow!" So I called Bruce Hart. They had a number and everything. It was 2,500 then, which is kind of what it is, I think, today, maybe a little more. But yeah, I saved up money and I booked a ticket to Calgary and went all the way out there, not knowing, because I thought, this is my only opportunity, not knowing that Johnny Rods from, WWF fame had a school in New York, and Killer Kowalski had one in Boston, which are 2 hours from my home. But at the end of the day, it worked out great. But yeah, that's how I got into the business, just happenstance, really.
And important is it for a guy today, or even a few years ago, and or whenever they're really getting into the business? How important it is for them to pick the right wrestling school?
It's so important, man. And there's a bunch of factors that go along with it. But I think today, men and women getting into the wrestling business have a huge advantage over what we had to go through because, again, we weren't as smart as kids are today coming into the business. There's all this information online, and you really could do a proper research. What I would suggest for anyone who's 18 plus years old and is ready to make a career or attempt a career in this business, do your research, man. I mean, I would always go. I mean, I really did get lucky finding the Hart brothers. Of course, I was familiar with Bret and Owen Hart, and I knew that the Harts, the brothers, and Stu Hart had also been deeply involved in wrestling and owned the Calgary Stampede wrestling territory. So I got lucky. But today, men and women have an immense opportunity to do their research and really find out as much as you can because there's a lot of schools out there that that fly under the radar, so to speak. Just because, for example, I know I did a podcast recently with a young kid who got trained by a school that was owned by Seth Rollins, but did Seth Rollins go there? You know what I mean? Who was actually training? So that happens quite a bit, just because you have, even the Harts were somewhat guilty of that. Just because the Harts ran it, I saw Bruce Hart and Keith Hart maybe once a week. And as a lot of you know, Lance Storm and Chris Jericho, who had come through previously from the previous Hart camp, Lance majority trained the camp. Chris would come by once in a blue moon just to work out, but Lance really did most of my in-ring training. So I would try to find out, go to a reputable school. And like I said, there's plenty of ways to find out information. Google stuff, Google the people that are running it, and find out, who they've put out there. Ask questions. I mean, I can't say this enough. Ask as many questions as you can to people that have gone to the school, people that are from the area who they've put out, and who's actually doing the training. Because like I said, there's a lot of great schools with big names, but 9 times out of 10, those guys are not going to be the ones in the ring. So, if you're from the Northeast, you're in luck, because there's a lot of great schools. I know Florida has a bunch of great schools. I'm not too sure about, I'm sure they're out there in Chicago and the Midwest. I'm just not too familiar with it, in Los Angeles as well. But guys and gals, do your research, because there's a lot of good information out there that wasn't there maybe 25 years ago.
I feel like that is guilty of a lot of guys. They say that they're in charge of the school, and they may not ever go there, or may go there once in a great while, and once in a blue moon may show up to the school.
Right.
Is that something that's like commonplace? Is that like a little sneakery thing? Like, is that just to get their name on like the marquee? What's the reason behind that?
I don't think it's trickery per se. I just think it's a business venture. It's probably no different than running a bodybuilding gym and saying it's run by, like when Sting and Luger owned Main Event Fitness in Atlanta. They worked out there once in a while, but it's not like they ran the operation. And I think that's true really to a lot of wrestling schools. I know the Dudleys both have schools. Bubba has one in the Connecticut, Danbury area, if I'm not mistaken. It might be over the border in New York, but still around this vicinity. And I know Devon had one in Florida, but they advertise it as, the Team 3D kind of academy. But I've heard nothing but good things, to where they actually, show up a lot of the time. They do have head trainers though. So, again, it's just about asking questions, and that does happen a lot. But there are also schools, and this is where I might even not go with the bigger names, so to speak, and find like there's a lot of hidden gems out there of guys that have been in the business for 20 plus years that are actually very hands-on, that will do the training and take more of the time to help you than a lot of the bigger name schools I found. Because the bigger name schools are more of a they're more, not that it's I hate to word it carefully. It's not that it's a gimmick, but it's, they're using their fame and their name to call students. But how much time are they really spending in it is, it's different everywhere. But where if you found a guy, like I have a guy here in Connecticut, his name is Slick Wagner Brown. I don't know if you know him, John,
Oh yeah.
but
Oh, big time. Yep.
yeah, and Slick, he's had a career, man. He's been around for
Oh,
a long
indie
time.
legend. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's had matches in WWF, TNA, stuff like that. He's been everywhere, and he owns a school here, and he's there every day. Every day every day they run classes. He's there front and center, doing the work. So places like that are to me the better places, because you're going to get the attention that you might be looking for, as opposed to maybe being in a group of 15 students where they're just kind of blowing by drills, and you're not going to get that the proper attention that you may need.
I feel like there's a lot of schools out there, like you said, like Slick Wagner Brown, where the guy, it might be even better of a trainer just because he's so seasoned, or he knows
Right.
exactly what you need to do to get to a certain point. I mean, the guy's been everywhere and he's done everything. Maybe not on like a national level or whatever, but he knows at least how to get there and has some foot in the door, so to speak. Is that like an even better kind of thing? Because you might get some more one-on-one and hands-on training from a guy like that.
I certainly think so. I mean, if I had to do it all over again, that's the route I would take. Only because going around the country and doing seminars and just knowing what I know and knowing the people I know, It really is the case, because when you have a big name like, again, Seth Rollins, I'm sure it's a beautiful facility. I didn't even know he had a school, but Seth works a full time schedule. He's a top guy in the WWE. What are you going to see him once ever? Probably.
Right.
If he's home on a day off, it's not going to be. And again, I don't know who his head trainers are, but that's the thing. You're paying for his brand, not necessarily his training. And I don't know how what's his curriculum. That's another thing too, because you're going to want a guy that is very sound in basics and really that's something that they pride themselves in, because you don't want to go to a school where they'll and I've seen this done and I think it's disgusting, where they'll train with a big huge crash mat in the middle of the ring. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but the first 4 to 8 weeks where you do the majority of your training, there should be no crash pad. You should not need a crash pad because you shouldn't be going up to the top rope. um, and that happens a lot. There's a lot of misinformation. And a lot of schools run different ways. When I went to the Hearts, for example, and this is something that everybody out there thinking about this should really listen to. A lot of schools that I've seen, they run all the time. They're constantly running. They run maybe lessons twice a week, and they want you to keep re-signing and paying your dues, etc., whatever the price may be. When we went to the Hearts, and Lance Storm's Wrestling Academy did this, his was modeled very much after the Hearts, and Lance sure as hell did the training. Why? And that's probably why he's had so many great graduates come out of there. He modeled the Hart way, which was, we were there for 8 weeks. We trained Monday through Friday, 2 hours a night for 8 weeks. Once you were done with those 8 weeks, you were a pro wrestler. And I think a lot of times you get guys and gals, oh, I've been wrestling for 2 years, but I'm still going to this dojo and I'm still paying dues and fees to train. So it's like there comes a time where you got to take the training wheels off, so to speak, and don't get caught up in, what I mean. Find out what is it, what am I paying for, and don't get sucked into continuing on. I mean, it's okay to join the gym if you want ring time, but you should, what I mean, if it makes sense, like after a certain amount of time, you should know your basics. And like I say, the rest of your learning, where high spots and big moves, that comes during your career, not at wrestling school. I remember showing up my first couple of days at the Hearts. I got in the ring, I started hitting the ropes and doing all kinds of flipping around, and I got yelled at. And they're like, "Man, you don't even hit the ropes for the first couple of weeks at all. Like, you really learned respect, grappling, locking up, all the stuff I preach and I say over and over again, the stuff that's not going to excite you, the stuff that's going to bore you at first. But doing those things correctly will elevate you eventually to the kind of wrestler I think everybody wants to be, which is a technical, sound, crisp wrestler. And that other stuff will come, but don't get sucked into one of those high spot factories where you're doing superplexes your first week when you can't take a proper backdrop.
It seems like to me a lot of the younger wrestlers today, it seems like they might be skipping a bunch of stuff, because
Mm,
I've seen it in AEW and I've seen it a little bit in WWE, but more so AEW. The guys can't even lock up, but they're doing like 10 million flips and dives. It's like, holy
yeah,
crap, who the hell, like, what wrestling school taught you? It almost seems like, all right, let's skip all the basics and fundamentals.
right.
Let's go right to the flips and the dives.
Yeah, and like I said, of course, everything, you're going to need all of it. You're going to need the flips and the dives in this day and age. I'm not saying you don't. Of course, you're going to need to work the way everyone else is working, or at least be able to do some of that stuff. But without a good foundation, it's like anything else, really. It's like with work or whatever kind of job you do, whatever kind of, like, in basketball, free throws aren't exciting, but if you're a 93% free throw shooter and every time you get up to the line, that's an automatic 2 points. That's a good thing. Where, as opposed to like a Shaquille O'Neal back in his day, he could barely make a free throw. You're going to want to know your basics. You're going to have to dribble before you could dunk. And it's really like that in wrestling. You're going to want to be very technically sound, also too, to protect yourself. You know what I mean? There's guys that, I don't think young men and women getting into the business think about this stuff anymore, because it doesn't happen as much, but does at times, where guys will try to, shoot on you, not necessarily to hurt you, but maybe a guy doesn't want to do certain things and may, lead ass you and not go up for your moves or try to make you look like shit. It does happen. It happens less and less, but it does happen. And, by going to a good school, that'll teach you kind of how to lock up and how to, really shoot an arm, and how to, if somebody messes with you or if somebody messed with me in the ring, I would know how to protect myself to where I could lock someone down and they couldn't get away with something. And those are the things that you really need to learn, because when you're traveling the world, you're going to Japan, you can't even speak the language. They're not going to hold your hand, and they're not going to take care of you. You're going in the squared circle. You're going to have to take care of yourself. You're going to have to be able to handle yourself. And I think we, as a generation of young wrestlers, you forget that. It's almost like, oh, we're all buddies. We all shake each other's hands. We're all in this together. But when you're on the big stage, it's not like that at all. You got to, it's dog eat dog. You know what I mean? And you got to kind of know what to do to protect yourself in the ring. And that's something that nobody really talks about anymore.
The thing is, which is so interesting, is there's like, I guess, a couple different methods of how to train. I mean, there's more than a couple, but when Dr. Tom and Lance Storm kind of had a little back and forth, but it was weird. It was Lance Storm not really responding, but he was taking Dr. Tom's comments. It was really kind of odd, but he wouldn't say it was Dr. Tom, but then he said everything Dr. Tom said, but he kind of spun it in one direction. It was just, weird thing. But if anybody has a chance, PG, if you haven't seen it, go look it up online. But Lance was basically saying the guys today are kind of being disrespected by the veterans, and Dr. Tom was saying the veterans get disrespected by the young guys of today. And like Lance might have had the much more like, all right, let's be soft with them, that kind of approach. Dr. Tom is the opposite. Let's be hard on them and toughen them up first. Is that just old school versus new school? How do you kind of take that?
I don't. It is a little bit old school versus new school. But like anything else, and again, Lance did the training and he came from that old school. I don't believe in necessarily being too hard either, because some of the stuff that happened in those days was a bit barbaric and uncalled for. That being said, there were also lessons. So I think really the answer to that, in my opinion, is somewhere in the middle. I think where Lance really excelled was he's a very good communicator when he's training. And I think by being that kind of patient, he was very patient and still is, was able to communicate and to work with you. So his way was definitely a little more gentle, but I would not say soft. So I think somewhere it goes somewhere in the middle, because when you get put out there, you're going to encounter stuff that isn't so easy or so in your favor. So it's good to kind of know how to go. So I didn't know this argument. Actually, I will go look it up. It's interesting, but yeah, I think it falls somewhere in the middle, where I think today we should have learned that a lot of the stuff that was happening in the old days didn't really work, and we had a lot of brutality, and a lot of guys kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, and got hurt seriously, and if not hurt seriously, mentally scarred, because a lot of those things that happened, even to myself in those days, were barbaric. So I think that falls in the middle. But I think what Tom is saying too is, in the reality, it's a very, very tough business, and it isn't for everyone. And the Hearts should know, and Lance kind of should know too, because they tried to run people out too. When we got in, there were 12. I wouldn't say 12. That's exaggerating. I'd say probably eight to nine guys, and only 2 finished. But they didn't beat you up. They didn't beat you up to get rid of you. They would, work you to death, like squats and running and stuff like that, like calisthenics, and really like blowing you up. Like they made you work. like, you would go in there and sweat your ass off. So, but again, it's not for everyone. And I think what Tom is saying too is we're letting too many people in, and if we let too many people in, whereas there's not going to be any jobs for the guys teaching. And that's always been something that I've been strong about is we've kind of given the keys to the marks and not kept any for ourselves. And, because that goes a long way too. And it sounds kind of callous, but, there's so many guys with jobs and veterans kind of fell by the wayside. And I guess it's the older generation's way of kind of protecting themselves, because we all get old at some point, and those 22-year-olds that are there now or 25-year-olds are going to be 35, 45 real quick. And but it's like anything else, with everything changes. But yeah, that's a real interesting concept, and I'd say once again, probably somewhere in the middle, on that argument.
Yeah, it's funny because I think Lance may have taken Doc Tom out of context a little bit. I know what Lance means, where he's coming from. A lot of the older guys do kind of disrespect some of the younger guys for a lot of different things. But Dr. Tom was saying, kind of making fun of the topes and the dives. He puts his own little spin on it. He calls them like Hava Coronas and toupees instead of topes, like just being jokey stuff. But he was basically saying, like, you could do, stupid shit, or you could do whatever you want in the match for the high spot or for the pop. But he goes, you got to do the basics and the fundamentals. Some of these guys can't lock up, and some of these guys can't do this, and if something goes awry in the match, they're completely lost. When back in the day, if something would happen, you would be like, okay, do this, because we can adapt. These guys are going this spot by spot, and he was just basically saying you could do that, but why not make it have sense? Do some wrestling, do something, and then do the high spot, and then mix it in. Like, there are guys that do it today, but he was saying those guys are kind of few and far between. He's seeing a lot more just spot fest.
Right. And two, I think a lot of it for me is that for me, and I guess it forever changes, but wrestlers for me always were guys, like, if they walked into a bar, you wouldn't want to fight them, or they could handle themselves. And I think a lot of it has gone by the wayside, to where the look of the professional wrestler has changed, to where not to pick on weight, but a lot of guys are under 150, 160 pounds. They barely look like athletes. And I think that kind of adds to, I don't know if it's the suspension of disbelief or what it is, but to me, it always intrigued me more to have a guy that was 230 pounds, like a Kurt Hennig or a Bret Hart, that was not too big, but still, you know what I mean, could handle himself. It kind of, it adds to the aura. When I first started coming around and I saw a guy like Ted DiBiase, Teddy doesn't look big on TV, but when you met him in person, he was 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds. His thighs looked like tree trunks. And I was like, holy cow. Like, just the impression he left on me when I saw him live next to me.
He may even be taller too. He's a big boy. He's big. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, when you see that live, and people are at ringside and stuff, and they see it, it's something that really makes pro wrestlers, which were before looked at as like, these guys are supreme athletes, to be 200 plus pounds heavyweights, and to do what they do and to work like they do. And it's taken a lot less seriously when it looks like somebody that goes to college with your son flipping around. You know what I mean? It barely has chest hair. You know what I mean? And again, it's a personal preference. And I think, look, there's all different sizes and flavors in wrestling, but I think it all, it all has to kind of blend. And I think lately it just seems like we're going with just a different breed. Like, I saw recently Angelico and Jack Evans, and man, they look like two skinny, pale toothpicks that if I saw in a bar would not scare me, and I think that hurts the business. And I could see what it means, because he came from those days where, he's a big guy, but he was small in those days, comparatively speaking. So, and I want to get back on topic. I kind of left on the size thing, but yeah, man, it's just I don't know, different strokes, I guess, for different folks. But I would like to see people just learn more just really get your basics down. Because if you go up to WWE, And if you train at NXT, from what I heard, it's just really excellence of execution kind of stuff. They really focus on the grappling and that stuff, because really, that's what matters, I think, in constructing a match, because the other stuff, like I said, will come, and the other stuff's really easier than the grappling. It doesn't take much to do, a cutter, so to speak, but it'll take a lot to do, some good chain wrestling or some stuff. If somebody were to shoot on you, you could kind of get off, get in there and protect yourself. So
Yeah.
I
And
digress.
the thing with Storm is he's got some people that have made it to WWE, so obviously
Yeah,
he knows what he's doing as a trainer. So what he's doing may work for him, and like Dr. Tom always says, there is no right way. There's different things for
that's
different
very
people, so it
true.
may not work. But it's interesting, all the guys Dr. Tom trained, the Rock and Edge was a part of that at one point, and then obviously Mark Henry, Kurt Angle. He got a bunch of
Right.
Vince McMahon himself, Shane McMahon. I mean, he's got a bunch of pretty good credits to his name. So if he says something, I don't know, like if you're Storm, you kind of want to say, okay, maybe I disagree respectfully, but you may have a
Right.
point as well, because you kind of train some pretty important guys, and I know Storm
Yeah.
has too, but Doc Tom
Right.
definitely knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and also too, Dr. Tom came from a vast, like, his career spanned so many decades of working with different guys. Like, that's one thing that experience really helps, because he's been through the territory system, and what I mean by that is he's gotten to work all styles and has so much knowledge that at some point that's worth something. And I think, it's important not to lose that. So I respectfully would agree that, knowing that is probably the most important thing. Like I said, I've said it a million times, and basics, 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 and that's a fact.
The basics and the fundamentals, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep.
It is interesting. You kind of mentioned like guys training and maybe the head guy like Seth Rollins, or maybe the Hearts aren't there as much. Shawn Michaels back in the day when he had his training school, it was all Rudy Gonzalez. Rudy Boy was the trainer, and
Yep.
Daniel Bryan Danielson's there, Paul London, Brian Kendrick, Lance Cade. There's a bunch of obviously huge, big time, big name stars. Kind of get equated to Michaels, but it was more Rudy Boy.
Yeah. I was down there the first year Sean ran it, and Paul Diamond was down, actually the one down there too,
Oh
helping
yeah,
out. Yeah.
yep.
And I remember the first year Sean being, because I stayed there for a week, and I did his classes when the year Brian was down there. It was his first year in business, and I did one of his shows, um, down in whatever he called it, SWA or something like that.
Hmm.
And but anyways,
TWA.
TWA, that's right. Damn it, Texas Wrestling Alliance. But nonetheless, he showed up a lot more, and then you start to realize, I think a lot of people do that. It's a full time commitment, and it's you need to, if you're somewhat busy in the business, you need a head trainer. So, I think it's important to find out and ask the questions. Who's your head trainer? Or you probably don't even have to ask. You can probably just research. I know if you go on Twitter, there's a ton of wrestling schools, and the head trainers are always tweeting out, and you can actually kind of see, who's got what, like the Monster Factory.
Yep.
Always the Danny, what's his name?
Danny
Is it
Cage.
Danny Cage is always posting stuff, and I think he has a pretty good school down there. So there's ways to find out, and just with all the resources, just do your homework and find out. Ask questions. That's the biggest thing I would say.
Feel like there's definitely a ton of schools out there like Monster Factory and like Dr. Tom and like Storm, I guess is coming back out with his again, that you
Oh,
could
is he?
definitely get a bunch of different knowledge and a bunch of different stuff, but almost go from one to another and get different information from each guy. It's kind of cool what's out there right now,
Yeah.
but you got to go to the right one. It's got to be the right fit for you as a wrestler.
Yeah, both, and also don't be afraid to ask financially what it's going to take, because like I said, that's usually a good bait and switch that a lot of schools have, is they'll try to keep you on there paying your dues, and maybe you know what I mean. You got to be careful if they're not training you at the proper pace, because it's
Yep.
real easy once they have you to keep their hooks in you, and you got to kind of know, um, what's the reputation, who's been through there. And like I said, ask questions and ask good questions, questions that make sense, like how long is the program, how long do I have to keep paying, where do I go from there? Because some schools, at least when I was coming through, the Hearts would promise you a couple of matches coming out of camp. You know what I mean? That's like one of the things that they always promised you. Like, we had to sign agreements, and it's funny. And Lance mentioned this too. When we signed our initial agreements, if in the first 5 years we had gotten any success with any of the major companies, we owed them like 10% of our earnings within the first 5 years. Yeah. And Lance actually had the piece of paper, posted it on Twitter. I think he still has it up there somewhere in his media. But yeah, we all had to sign those. They never actually did, because they would have been they would have had rights to some of my money. But it was just if they created the next Hulk Hogan, who knows, they were going to get a piece. But just, yeah, don't be afraid to ask those questions, man, because there's a lot of different schools require a lot of different things, and the prices are very different across the board, and your commitment is very different. So, just do all the good research you can.
Yep. And I think that's a great stopping point, and that's a great point for
Yeah.
sure. Definitely do your research. Be prepared. You got to know how much money you're going to have to put into it as well. And just want to also mention some plugs. You can go to my Instagram and my Twitter at 2Man Power Trip. You can go to PJ's Instagram and Twitter at PJ Polacco. My website is tmptempire.com. PJ, give us all your plugs and information. I know you've got a pro wrestling tee store and everything else you got going on.
Absolutely. If you want any of my t-shirts, go to prowrestlingtees.com/justincredible. 20 pretty awesome t-shirts there if you're interested right now, the holidays. There's some promo codes. So just go to my Twitter feed and you'll see that on there. And also theindyconnection.com. I just started doing stuff with them. I have one shirt on there, and also they do kind of a cameo thing that with all different kinds of packages and stuff. So if you want theindyconnection.com, check them out. They're pretty cool. And I think that's it. That's pretty much all the plugs I have. Oh, the wonderful Patreon show, Russo, patreon.com, Russo TWC. We do our Friday morning AEW review live on Twitch for the first 10 minutes. So check us out if you're interested.
And right now on Russo's brand, go to russosbrand.com. They have, hey, what's up? They have, sorry, my daughter's giving. They have a special for the month of a free month. So definitely
right on.
check that out.
Yeah,
russosbrand.com. PJ, take us out the only way you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on another edition of Pro Wrestling 101. As always, we're not just the coolest, and we're not just the best. Pro Wrestling 101, we are just incredible. See you next time.